You are listening to the Billy Dees Podcast.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. I am Billy Dees, and as always, I am absolutely thrilled that you are here. If you've never checked us out before, we are primarily an interview and a commentary-based podcast. Today, we're going to have a commentary. Sometimes we go live, and this isn't live. This is in the studio, and as a matter of fact, I'm doing something a little differently. I'm stylizing this one just a little differently. I'm kind of known for that radio style approach, that gritty approach. And I just wanted to mix it up today. And this is a bonus episode. This is in addition to our usual rate of episode release. So it's a bonus episode. And I'm just going to try something a little different today. What we are going to talk about is innocence. And sometimes that might mean a little naivete. Sometimes that might mean, what's the word I'm looking for here? Brash stupidity, being a fool, these types of things being used as a way to soften your communication. And I'm not in any way implying that when you communicate, you should come off as stupid. On the other hand, when you come from a very high place, it is sometimes a turnoff. And I know I've listened to a lot of these influencers, especially the ones that talk about business and success and all this stuff, and they have this real hard line, and they humiliate their students and show them how weak they are and all this. I know that's a certain type of bravado that may work in certain cases, but other times not so much. And this applies not only to you presenting yourself, but it also applies to selling a story. And what I'm going to talk about today, and I promise you this is going to go a different direction than what you might suspect, but I'm going to talk about the Haktua girl, and I'm also going to talk about Snow White. Because these were two stories that really could have benefited by injecting a little bit more innocence, a little bit more modesty. And I promise you this isn't going to be the usual talking points about those two subjects. It's going to be something completely different. Many moons ago, and I do mean many moons ago, I took some classes at Kent State. And there was a classic literature class. And, this was like Dante's Inferno and all that other type of stuff. And one of the ones that really grabbed my attention, and I hope I'm saying this correctly, was by Desiderius Erasmus. I'm probably butchering that first name, but we'll just go with Erasmus. And the work of art is called The Praise of Folly. And this thing has a lot of layers to it. It's sarcastic, it's funny, it's comedic, it's also very insightful. And it actually gets very deep in some places. He goes into areas such as people who are quote-unquote innocents, as he describes it, or fools, generally live happy lives. And I've known a lot of people that were brilliant individuals, but they were absolutely tortured by analysis and worry. It does seem like folks who just take life for what it is, don't try to analyze it, don't try to solve a mystery, don't get too deep into all the details, generally live carefree lives. That's very true. He goes into other things like why women will often take up fools as husbands and other things. So there's a lot of layers to this. But one of the ones that I am going to concentrate on today is receiving messages. And one of the lines that sticks out to me in this is A statement which would cost a wise man his head is received from a fool with the greatest delight. And why is that? Truth that is free from offensiveness does give genuine pleasure, and only fools have the power to speak it. Whatever a fool has in his heart is all over his face and speech. Now, wise men have two tongues, one for speaking the truth, and the other for saying whatever is expedient at the moment. You know, oftentimes, getting back to a lot of these influencers and things, I will notice there's a little subliminal message in whatever it is they're selling or whatever they're trying to get across to you. And that can be a turnoff to me. But there's something to be said for someone who just speaks their mind and doesn't worry about how it's going to be perceived. It's not a calculated statement. It's not any of those things. It's just pure truth. And as he points out in here, people who are a fool, people who are innocent, people who may not know any better, they often get perceived and these messages get taken in without resistance, because there's something about the purity of that message that just comes across so well. One of the other lines I really like in this work by Erasmus, The Praise of Folly, is that when it comes to these innocents, as he calls them, even wild beasts perceive their harmlessness and do not attack them. That is just awesome. One of the things that really can be incorporated into this type of communication is comedy. And this is especially true of what was referred to there for a while as, Southern comedy. There's something about Southern sensibilities. This black and white, hey, here's how it is type of sensibility that, especially when it's spoken with a Southern accent, it is a extremely powerful tool, not only in terms of comedy, but to get a point across without being offensive. A lot, Jeff Foxworthy, the Cable Guy, all these individuals really exploited that type of style of communication in their material, and it worked very well. I took I don't want to say a class, but I went through a workshop a number of years ago for stand-up comedians, and I was around some very skilled professionals, and it seems like the consensus was very similar to what I'm talking about. They often said if you walk into a room and you walk on that stage like you own the place, the audience will sense it and they'll resent you for it. And I really like the idea that sometimes this humility, this innocence, is a great way to consider how you present yourself. Here again, I'm not saying flat out try to sound stupid or make careless remarks or do anything calculated. That takes away the whole point in all this. I just want to bring out that there's a certain aspect that is very valuable in terms of this style of communication, this aspect of communication. Now let's start with the Hawk Tuah girl. If you don't know what that is, I'm not going to get into any graphic explanation of what that is. It does describe a certain sexual act where someone spits on the member of a male individual, and the sexuality of that, it was done during one of those street interviews. And by the way, those street interviews are starting to, as a genre of stuff, is just, they're getting to be a bit much. I'm tired of the street interviews, but the street interview was such that she was answering a question about how to please your partner, your man. And her answer was, well, sometimes you got to give it that Hawk Tuah. You feel me? And she started laughing. the sexual component of this isn't what really sold it. It isn't why it went viral. A lot of people did not understand why that went viral. It went viral because, here again, she's got this Southern twang, and she spoke so matter-of-factly about it. Do you feel me? And she threw in this little thing, I love you, Pookie, whoever that was. And she just came across as this innocent girl who was asked a very forward question, came up with a hilarious answer, and she seemed like, if you lived in a home in a small town in your hometown, she seemed like the type of girl that you just knew. You know, she worked at the country store, and she was so relatable. She was somebody you'd probably like to hang out with at the bar. Some of her early interviews, she said she worked at a spring factory, and somebody said, a spring factory? And her answer was, boing. You know, and these were the types of things that made her very endearing. There was a sweetness. There was a charm in that. And then she got involved in this Bitcoin thing. And I don't want to speculate on what happened there. My guess is she was talked into something to some degree. You know, she's a young girl. And it turned into a bit of a fiasco. I won't go into the details of it, but a lot of people lost money. And there was accusations that, you know, that this was a scheme. And what really changed her perception, how she is received, was the enormous amounts of money that were involved. I mean, we're talking millions upon millions of dollars. Now, what that did is it took the relatability away. It took the charm away. It took the innocence away. She's resurfaced to some degree. I don't know if that image can ever be put back together, regardless of how the whole thing with the coin, whatever that was. I'm not sure if it was exactly Bitcoin, but it was some sort of cryptocurrency. And I'm not sure the innocence is going to return. She might be able to rebuild some of that. As I said, when she answered the question about what she did and she said, boing, I really was hoping that she was going to get with the proper handlers. Initially, the things that were done were correct. They had these American Idol stylized, you know, down home girls sitting on the back porch with a glass of iced tea, sun tea, just, relaxing and talking about her upbringing and all this other kind of stuff. And I thought, okay, they're going the right direction. And then they threw her into a podcast, and it was a podcast that very clearly had a lot of production money behind it. And, you know, podcasting is a lot like other things. You know, it's one of those things where it works best by people who have it in their DNA. It works best with people that wanted to do it from the very beginning. A lot of the creators that built podcasting, they had a passion for it. And I've been in situations where I've been asked to produce podcasts. Somebody has a client that they want to present in a podcast, and they have me do all the technical things, which I understand. And, you know, then they give this person a list of talking points, a list of things to talk about, and they plop them in front of a microphone. And what happens at that point is it's something that's artificial. It's very synthetic. And I understand, okay, podcasting's the thing. You know, she's got a huge audience. Let's give her a podcast and have her talk about stuff. And it seems like a good idea in the beginning. But when these things are too contrived too quickly, they start to get a little mired down. Now, here again, if that alone was the case, if that's where it stopped, it wouldn't have been so bad. But then this thing grew into the crypto whatever happened there. How that was presented, how it was marketed. A lot of people said it wasn't done well at the very least. Other people said there was, something really wrong in terms of it being a scheme. And then the wheels came off at that point. And some of the things I've noticed her do recently just hasn't that initial charm of that hot tour, you feel me? That moment of that funny, charming Southern girl was gone, and it was a real missed opportunity. Had I handled her, I think the American Idol stylized videos would have been really good. I would have put her in some funny situations, whether it be on the farm or a fish out of water always works, like Beverly Hills Cop. That's a fish out of water. Okay. You're taking somebody from one environment and putting them in another. And, that would have been great to take the girl that worked in the spring factory and put her in a situation that is completely different. Those are all formulas. That's where I would have gone with that. Unfortunately, the thing with the coin came up. And like I said, I'll be really surprised if she can attain what she once had, because it's like I said, the innocence is gone now. You're talking about millions of dollars, and it's just that's hard to. And I don't know how many people lost money in the whole thing. Apparently, there was a great deal of them. So it was a missed opportunity. That's where innocence could have really been used as a great communication tool. Now, I've talked about Snow White before in the regular podcast, and I want to be very clear about Rachel Zegler. I understand that a lot of the criticism that she has gotten she's brought on herself, but enough is enough, in my opinion. I'm not going to throw shade on Rachel Zegler during this interview, doing this podcast. She's very young also, and she made some mistakes. And I'm from a football town, and there's a term in football called piling on, and we're piling on now. She's down. Okay, we don't need to pile on. Some of the memes, some of the things that I've noticed online involving her have been downright mean, and enough is enough. Okay, she was in a crappy movie. She's not a serial killer. It's time to move on. She doesn't need to be treated that way publicly, in my opinion. And I place a lot of the blame on the Disney company and the people who wrote this movie, because here again, they missed the whole boat on what Snow White is about. The charm of Snow White, it's not just about the color of her skin, as white as snow. What it's about is a certain amount of innocence. Dare we say a certain naivete. This has to do with someone who was an inspiration because she was so sincere. She was so real. And, I've heard people talking about if somebody else had been cast who was, pale, and that may or may not be a component of it, but it really has to do with innocence. Her innocence was, in fact, a inspiration for the other people in the movie. They were so inspired by her truthfulness and her sincerity as a person that it made them better. It wasn't the idea that, she's weak because she needs a man, or she wanted to fall in love, or she was waiting for Prince Charming. This was all a part of, these things, these types of stories are fairy tales. They're fantasies. They're meant to be whimsical. And she was a innocent person who wanted to bond with someone. And there's nothing ugly about this story at all. People are making it ugly. The only thing that I would have changed, what I was a critic of this movie from the very beginning, because of all the political correctness that they tried to work into it, I understand that little people in regard to dwarfs, that those characters have often been caricatures of little people. So I would have gone the other direction with this. I would have gone the direction of having a Snow White who's innocent, pure, white as snow, and having 7 little people cast and be real human breathing people with human storylines. It could have made stars out of actors who are little people. Instead of having these caricatures, have them as independent little storylines, stories that you could relate to and humanize them. There's a huge audience out there, not just young people, but adults who have never seen a little person portrayed that way. One of the rare exceptions would have been Peter Dinklage in Game of Thrones. And that's probably a program that a lot of young people that would have, the Snow White story is aimed at shouldn't be watching. So it would have been great to have 7 real, live, little human beings who were portrayed with feelings and emotions and cared about Snow White and cared about themselves and cared about their own development. They missed such an opportunity with making this character into something that's supposed to be a leader and it's supposed to be this and that. And it takes away from the central part of the story in that it was her innocence. It was her naivete. It was her purity of heart that made the story work. They didn't need to make her into a superhero. And I've said this before, and I will say it again. If you're going to take this route of, well, there are certain aspects of this story that we need to drastically change. We need to do this, we need to do that, we need to do the other thing. And if you're doing this drastic rewrite, then you're not remaking the story. You're rewriting something that is different. And if you're going to take that route, then write something different. Write a story. And here's something I've never understand. Now, Snow White is obviously a product of Western culture. There's a lot of fairy tales and a lot of stories about life and lessons to be learned from all around the world that we could have explored. We don't need to go back and change the ones we're familiar with. So there was so much missed opportunity here in what could have been done with this story had they recognized that it's the truth that comes from an innocent that is so entertaining. It is so non-offensive. It has an inherent charm. So in analyzing these 2 individuals, these 2 things, the Haktua girl and Snow White, what can we take away from it? Well, here again, I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying if your content has to do with the stock market, that you should come off as naive. I'm not saying that at all. But this is an aspect of communication that we often forget. This is an aspect of how we relate to people. Sometimes when we're making friends, when we're getting to know someone, we're so eager to show them how smart we are. And being highly intelligent has some advantages, but it also has some downsides, and especially in terms of how it's perceived. And, a wise man would lose his head. Just like Erasmus said in the Praise of Folly, a wise man will lose his head if he tells the truth too sharply. And sometimes we don't need to be in a high place. We don't need to be in an authoritarian place. We don't need to be one of these rock-hard influencers who are shaming their students. Take off your shirt. Look at those man boobs. You should be ashamed of yourself. Blah, 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 blah. That's the shtick of one of them. I won't say his name. I would say, well, yeah, too bad you couldn't grow another couple inches. That would be my response. And that's dirty. It's rotten. See, and that's the type of thing. It doesn't come off well. It comes naturally to me, but I sometimes wish it wouldn't. But anyway, that's kind of my point, is there's a value in being innocent. There is a value to naivete. There is a value at seeing things black and white and not injecting a scheme, some subliminal storyline, little messages in everything you do. Sometimes it's just wise to play it straight and from the heart. Anyway, I'm Billy Dees. I kind of hope you enjoyed this mini bonus episode of the Billy Dees Podcast. Just a little reminder, if you don't know by now, depending on where you're seeing this or hearing it, you can find the Billy Dees Podcast pretty much anywhere podcasts are found. We have now a 10-year history with podcasting. And actually, with podcasting, I go back farther than that, and I go back way farther than that when it comes to media. But the Billy Dees Podcast, in its current form as a show that's searchable and findable, we're coming up on 10 years now. So we've been doing this a long time. You can find the Billy Dees Podcast, like I said, on any platform you wish. Just search it out. In terms of social media, I would have to say that X is more or less my social media home. That's the former Twitter. And I'm at Billy Dees there. And we now have a Facebook page. It's Billy Dees Podcast. And we're trying to do some new things there on the Facebook page. We have a small following there, but it's cool because they're really into what we're doing. We have some behind-the-scenes stuff. We also talk about various types of equipment and things we're trying out. And we have stuff related to media stories and some of our partners we showcase on there as well, and some of the things that they are up to. It's not a page where you come to and watch. We're so great. We're so wonderful. Look at this. We don't do that. And another thing we don't do is we don't charge our listeners. It's absolutely free to subscribe to the Billy Dees Podcast on your favorite platform. All of our social media platforms are free as well. There's no paywalls, anything like that. We appreciate our listeners, and revenue streams come from other places, and they have to do with production, sponsorships, advertisements, things of that nature. The listener has free access, both free in terms of cost and free anytime they wish, to listen to an episode or subscribe or do anything they wish with our program. And hopefully you get value, even if it's just entertainment, maybe some things to talk about around the water cooler at work, some interesting stuff to kick around. That's what we're all about here. So I'm Billy Dees. Thank you very much for listening today. And we will talk to you again very, very soon.